Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, December 10th, 2020. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. All right, that was an interesting one. Welcome to the podcast this week. This is Norm hosting the show, of course. That was an intro. We're taking user submissions for intros, and that was one created by David Hensley, who had previously done a really great submission. This one, pretty fine as well, but you hyped it up in your email to me, Dave, saying that you thought this was the one that we'd pick. I think your last one was a little bit better. Joining me this week,
is lo-fi beats to chill to
yeah,
version of the intro.
And as you can tell, I don't listen to them before playing them on the show. So my first time as well. Kishore's here. Kishore, good to see you. How you doing?
I'm here. I'm good.
You got some good comments on your favorite things video that we published last week. People thought you were a little sad.
Yeah, all I got was like, he's sad. And it's partially because I talked about air filters and masks. And so they're like, oh, downer favorite things, but they're important, useful products.
We got to survive, right? That's a pretty favorite thing, I'd say.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot on your actual day job, so we're going to get to that in a moment of science. And you heard him. We have a special guest this week, Devindra Hardwar from Engadget and /film podcast /filmcast. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, doing okay, as good as I can be. I'm actually coming off of a 2-week vacation, but I guess vacations don't exist anymore, right? It was just like concentrated baby time. So no break.
So you didn't go anywhere.
Didn't go anywhere, couldn't go anywhere. I am outside of Atlanta now, and hey, people are not being safe in Georgia. It kind of sucks, but very happy to have some baby time. That was a great 2 weeks.
But Devindra, you're a resident of Georgia. Now you're the most important person in this country. According to
that was
every
clearly my plan.
Party.
Yes, yes. Honestly, I've talked to a lot of people who moved down here recently too, and there's a lot of folks from the Northeast and even California who came to Georgia for to work on production, because Georgia, around Atlanta is a big film production area, and I think the demographics are changing. So I love being down here. Super cool. I do miss New York though.
How was the move? You moved.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Norm.
I mean, you moved during the lockdown. How was that?
Hey,
process?
Yeah, that was not fun. Don't even ask me to recount that, because it was a whole we basically toured a house remotely. I had my folks come check it out. We didn't get to see the house. I bought a house, my first house. Love it a lot, but it was a weird thing where we couldn't even see it before we actually purchased it. So I had to come down. It's a whole thing. My family did it remotely. We did as much as we could remotely. We came down to flight. We missed our first flight. It was not great. It is like a traumatic thing that I've boxed up and just put in a quarter, and I'll deal with it at some point. But it was a crazy experience.
Well, did you go full tech on this and send your parents an iPhone 11? You're like, okay, I want you to go through and full LiDAR scan every room, and I'll just step into VR and experience the house before I get there.
That would actually be perfect if our LiDAR cameras were good enough that they could just fully capture 3D space. That would be perfect for me. But no, my parents went with their iPhones. We did a lot of FaceTiming, and I recorded FaceTime walkthroughs with my brother and my parents. And so my wife and I would just spend a lot of time going over that and going over photos. And it was not the ideal way to buy our first house, but it ended up being a good spot, good location. Nice overall. No big issue so far, knock on wood.
Was it more stressful to move with a toddler, or to pack up all your? Yes, the answer is yes.
It was all. Hey, we moved with a toddler. My daughter was 18 months at that point. We moved with 2 cats. We moved in the middle of a pandemic. We had to pack up our entire Brooklyn apartment, get it sent over, and we found some really great movers who really helped us out. They had to keep packing even after we ran to get to the airport. And New York, I feel like the city of New York gave me my final FU. It's just we sat outside on the curb waiting for cabs for 20 minutes and just nothing. Everything was done except getting a cab, and we got to the airport 5 minutes after our first flight took off. So just through like sheer desperation and good luck, we found another flight because also not many people are flying during the pandemic. It's not very safe. There aren't many planes running. So it was crazy how, things just like barely worked out for us, but
Oh
I'm
my
happy it did.
gosh. I was wondering, like, the gear pack up. I guess movers help pack that up. But I
Yeah.
can't even imagine with like TVs and all the gear you
Oh man.
test. Like that's
Well, let me
that's a
tell you
whole level of
guys,
stress.
U-Haul sells very good boxes. U-Haul sells very great, like I think triple or quadruple thickness boxes for electronics. So that was a big thing. And we did most of it ourselves. The movers helped me with like the big thing, like getting the TV into the box, but everything came unscathed. I'm very happy about that.
Are we gonna get a box review on Engadget? You're like, just gonna be like full on cardboard review.
I think you missed the when the PlayStation 5 dropped and Sony would only let us take photos of the box. It was basically my Twitter was just like, "Hey, welcome to box review time. This is a very nice box from Sony. It's very thin." I'm sure you had to deal with that too, Norm.
Yeah, or Microsoft same as well, right?
Yeah,
In terms of
same.
here's a very particular embargo on what on this part of the experience, but don't plug it into a TV. Don't show people what
Yep.
you can do with the game. Yeah, and you know we're hearing the same thing with Cyberpunk, which is coming out this week. In terms of don't put out game streams, or we will put takedown notices. Guess what? Streamers are all part of the marketing
Mhm.
machine for that. But I'm very excited to have you on the show this week. Sorry, Jeremy isn't here because we're going to talk about movies, we're going to talk about technology, and all the things that you cover. We ven very well in these things, and maybe even also the newborn life, the toddler
Sure.
life. Because
Toddler life now, man.
yeah, oh
Newborn
my
life
god,
just went so quickly.
we just put the kid down, and I'm
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah.
But we're going to get to our top story this week, and it is well. Let me play the music cue if I have it queued up. Do I? Here it is.
Top story this week.
This is one of those cases where the story broke right after recorded last week. Of course, we're talking about HBO Max. Not. It's a big week for Maxes. You got AirPod Max and you got HBO Max also doing their thing. But I'm actually glad that we had time to think about it because my immediate reaction, I don't think, held up. And there has been more information that's come out since. I'm still fuming. I'm glad he deleted
Sure.
some tweets. But of course, the big news after it was announced that Wonder Woman 1984 would come out on December 25th, on Christmas Day, on HBO Max for free for US subscribers, kind of killing the theatrical exclusivity window. HBO and Time Warner / AT&T have announced that for 2021, every film that was going to be in theaters will be also day and date on HBO Max in the US for 1 month before presumably it goes away. Then they can sell Blu-rays, they can do digital downloads. But we're talking films like Dune, Matrix 4, Godzilla vs. Kong. And what are the other notable ones? Those are the big tent poles.
Those are the big ones. Yeah.
Those are the big
Isn't there
ones.
Space Jam, or did you mention that already?
There is Space Jam. Yeah.
Space Jam as well. So there are a lot of different ways to talk about this, and I know it's a topic you guys covered on the /Filmcast. But
Let's just agree not to talk about it in the Christopher Nolan way. Any
Well,
other
Well,
way?
I do wanna bring him up.
I do want to
Yeah.
address that perspective, right?
Yes.
And more details have come to light in terms of what went on behind the scenes. The new kind of inside baseball information is that it sounds like HBO and Time Warner did this very differently than they did with the Wonder Woman 1984 deal and announcement. So there's a story in the Hollywood Reporter that for Wonder Woman 1984, it was a big, like Tenet being a big experimental film to put out in theaters during the pandemic, and was not a box office success. With Wonder Woman 1984, it was stepping into unknown territory, even though like Disney Plus obviously has put their theatrical films on the streaming service, with Mulan charging for $30 and Pixar's Soul also on Christmas Day going to be for free. HBO knew that they were basically forsaking $1 billion box office essentially to put Wonder Woman out on for streaming, and the back end deals, as it's been reported, is that presumably director Patty Jenkins and also Gal Gadot both got, instead of their typical points on the back end, they got basically 8-figure paychecks to make this happen, to the tune of $10 million each. That wasn't the case with the rest of the slate of films for Matrix 4, for Space Jam, for Dune. In many cases, the production teams, the producing partners, weren't even notified before this announcement was made, and that's a source of much consternation for them. So there's the business angle to talk about, there's the filmmaker angle, the creative angle, there's the consumer angle, which is probably where I want to start with. From a consumer standpoint, I know it's very different for you because you actually are in the film review business,
Mhm.
Vindra. But what do you think this means for consumers? Is this a good thing just from the consumer standpoint?
Well, I think we gotta take in the context of where we are, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Hey, a vaccine is coming soon. Maybe in 6 months things will be a little safer, but things are not safe right now. So as a consumer, I don't want to go to a theater. I won't be going for a long time. And I think for most people, like, yeah, I would love to see these movies at home. I'm totally fine waiting, but if their plan is to do it, actually launch it on streaming too, I'm not going to say no to that. HBO is finally upgrading their tech. They're going to have 4K and HDR starting with Wonder Woman. That was my big issue with HBO before because they were, HD for so long. So I think overall it's something that I'm looking forward to. I think for general consumers, it's totally fine too because people just want to see these movies. I used to live in New York where people would just, pick up a bootleg DVD or something that was out the week after a movie came out, and people would just watch movies that way too. I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying, like, hey, regular consumers, a lot of them don't care about the theatrical experience. But for me, also as a consumer, as a cinephile, I am very sad because I do think I prefer watching movies in a theater, even though I have a pretty decent home theater at home. Nothing beats going to a Dolby theater or something, or even a full IMAX screen. That full presence of the giant screen and the sound that they have and everything. It was just so great, and that's one thing I used to love about having in New York. We had a full sized IMAX at Lincoln Square. We had several Dolby theaters, and hey, we had a lot of like private screening rooms too that only film critics saw, and those were among my favorite places in the city. And now that's all just kind of gone, and I don't want that to be gone forever. But I do feel like I don't know if multiplexes will survive the pandemic. AMC, Regal have already been in serious trouble. I think one of them, not AMC, but was it Regal that filed bankruptcy already in
Yeah,
the US, or they're going to be
that's right.
closing up? Yeah. So multiplexes, as they were, which were really just, popcorn factories to make money. That's really what those things were. I never trusted those companies to think about the art of cinema or anything. They just wanted butts and seats buying concessions. I don't know if they're going to survive, and I won't miss them too much. I hope this means smaller screens, indie theaters, maybe some movie palaces. Because I used to, in New York, like we had several. As I lived there for 10 years, they just died one by one. One of my favorites was the Zickfield. It was around like 53rd Street, I believe, and I saw The Force Awakens there for its final screening for like a midnight show, and that was it was a beautiful thing because those are giant rooms. They're like plush carpeting, very nice curtains and whatnot, just devoted to movies. And maybe we'll get more of those going down the line because the communal experience, that's what we're not having for this year and maybe into next year. We're gonna miss that quite a bit.
I
Yeah,
think
I
from
think
the
there's going to be a
Mhm.
huge rebound in this, and that
Yeah.
like there's a pent up demand. Like all in all, this is great for consumers. I don't really have a lot of time for the people that are naysaying this, like oh we shouldn't do this. Like I can only watch so many more terrible holiday Netflix specials before I lose my mind. Like I want to see good films, and if they have good films, put them out now. Maybe come up with a plan to re-release them in theaters when it's safe to do so towards the end of the year. And we're literally talking about something that's maybe 6 8 months from now that they're going to be able to have some theaters open up. I agree, Devendra.
Mhm.
We don't know what it's going to look like, what the landscape of movie theaters are going to be, but there are going to be some movie theaters around. Like that whole industry is not going to go away by any stretch of the imagination.
well,
So
that's the
this is a
fear.
Mhm.
win. Uh, and I get that we won't get
Mhm.
Wonder Woman in IMAX the way it was shot by Patty Jenkins, and that makes me sad. But
It's
I
really
also
Dune. Dune is the one
need
that's making me
content.
so sad. Like
It's
Yeah.
sad. I mean, and you mentioned IMAX. That literally there was an
Mhm.
IMAX featurette where you have the typical filmmakers, the DP, the production people being trotted out to say this film being shot on celluloid is meant to be seen on the big screen, and we physically should not be doing that right now. And
Yeah.
I'm coming on the same page as you guys, where my gut reaction was a little more in the Chris Nolan camp, where I want to preserve the theatrical experience, but I am very privileged to be able to afford to be able to do in the before times, to watch an IMAX and pay
Mhm.
for an AMC stubs. Like I love that whole experience, and
Yeah,
I would go
AMC
out of my
A-list,
way.
like,
A-list,
I think,
exactly.
just like the I don't know if it's like the hubris of us as a society too, like, man, we had this subscription that didn't cost that much and Movie Pass and everything too, where we could just, like, freely go around, watch as many movies as we wanted, and it felt like peak
Eh,
capitalism in a
I
way, you know?
I literally ran a monthly film series at the Alamo Drafthouse up until, like, the pandemic started, and
Yeah, yeah.
like, if you asked me to describe that film series, it was, like, all the movies I wanted to see from my youth on the big screen, and it was amazing, and so,
I'm
like,
gonna steal that idea for when things kick back up, 'cause that sounds like fun.
So the perspective of the Chris Nolans of the world and stuff. I
Mhm.
mean, he's the most vocal, obviously, and which probably makes for a very uncomfortable conversation with his brother Jonathan Nolan as they're negotiating, Westworld season 4, also
Yep,
on
yep.
HBO, quote unquote, worst streaming service ever. Christopher Nolan, right? That's that's. Comes from the perspective of fear, right? He's on his high
Mhm, mhm.
horse, but what the perspective is that he's afraid that the thing he wants to preserve is going to go away, because
Yep,
the business model of theaters is one of gatekeeping, and it works. It worked for the past 50 to 100 years because the exhibition model allowed for big bets to be made and allowed for big investments to be made on films like Avengers, on films like the blockbusters, where a
mhm.
studio could afford to justify spending 100, 200, $300 million on a film, because they knew that for a dollar for time, they make a lot of money with the theatrical model. Much more. I mean, if you look at
Yep.
it, right, streaming, you're getting a much better bargain, just minutes per dollar spent. And so the fear is that after 2021, with putting these big budget films, which Warner Brothers had in their back pocket because these were all optioned and greenlit and paid for in the era before the pandemic, is that what does 2022 look like? What does 2023 look like? And it could look like more like the Netflix model, which isn't to say they're not willing to spend money on big budget films,
Mhm.
but if you look at what Warner puts out, it's far riskier than what Netflix puts out. Netflix will put, their biggest thing. They'll have Michael Bay do a film. They'll have the Chris Hemsworth, the Russo brothers film out. But that's like a mid tier,
Yeah.
tentpole release from
Lower
the old.
budget things, right? We actually ran a report a couple months ago about the highest budget thing coming to Netflix is gonna be the what $200 million thing, the Ryan Gosling movie, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the Russo brothers. That's a franchise
Yep.
building thing, and there's a lot of positives about that model when they control the IP, right? When they can
Mhm.
go very Disney in that the Disney MCU model, where they can have a big $100 million 2 hour experience, but also do long form serialized in universe building, which if they tell compelling stories for fans, that's a great thing. But I
Yeah.
think we will see fewer of those big bets unless the streaming model does somehow
Yeah.
also it's all in the accounting, right? It's all in how
I
they do it in the
Mhm.
back end.
I think that is the ultimate thing, right? Like, I think for next year, this plan to just get these movies out there, provide safely to people at home is great. But long term, the big budget movies, that is why we went to the theater. So things like the Lord of the Rings series or any of the MCU stuff, like the bets have to be smaller for streaming because the returns aren't as big. I think several people have pointed this out, but the money invested, actually it was a Steven Soderbergh quote from this morning, right? The money from these studios that they've invested to create these billion-dollar machines, that's not going away. They're really invested in this succeeding, so it's going to come back in some way. Maybe not as multiplexes. Maybe it's going to be more expensive theatrical things. That's something. There's a quote going around from George Lucas and Steven Spielberg from the '90s, where they essentially said, like, "Oh yeah, eventually movie theaters are going to be like more like going to the opera or something. You're going to see a play where it's more expensive, it's more exclusive in a way, but you may get more out of it. And yeah, with the distribution rights now that studios can actually own theaters, that could be part of the path down the line too.
Look,
Like Disney could have its own line of theaters and make
yeah,
you pay a ton of money to go see them, and people will still do it.
yeah, yeah.
I think all of these quotes underestimate the pent up demand that's going to
Sure,
be
sure.
there when it's safe to go back to these social experiences. Now, it may not be the same level, but I think the thing that's actually the threat to the industry is like a prolonged recession that actually comes from this and people not being able to afford to go to the cinemas. And the cinemas were already undergoing a transformation where they're becoming not only a destination to watch a movie, but a destination to get dinner, to get
Yeah.
drinks. There are full night out experiences. And I think we are going to see more of that high end catering. So I actually worry more about those mid tier indie releases, how well they're going to do in the cinema. Like, I'm not worried about Black Widow being a success when it comes out in cinemas. It may
Mhm.
not be 100% of where it would have been, but it probably is going to get to like 80-90% of what they were aiming for. And so I think the high end bets are still going to be there. I think the thing that they're underestimating is if they don't do this, where they release
Mhm.
these movies now, can you imagine what it's going to be like in 6 to 8 months when movie theaters open? There's going to be so many movies out all at once. It will be a horrible experience for the consumer. And I think movie studios are the ones that are going to be hurt. If I
Sure,
have to
sure.
see Wonder Woman, Black Widow, like Dune, and like in the span of a week, all of those come out, that's not good for the consumer.
Mhm. I also don't think they can afford to wait into 2021 too. Like
No.
the mantra throughout 2020 was, "Hey, if we can if we have to delay these movies, we will. You know, this is all an unexpected thing. We couldn't have prepared for it, so just push the movies, hope for the best." Looking now that you have some like foresight in terms of what the pandemic world is like, looking at 2021, things likely not going to be fully safe for a full year. They can't just sit on those movies because these are studios that they're expecting some sort of returns from it. They want some value out of it. Right now, the most value is putting it on HBO Max, so it's a stockholder thing. It's so Time Warner looks like they're actually producing something from this, and they get more subscribers, and they save a service that's kind of floundering. That makes sense to me. This is getting into the weeds of the business, but I feel like they do have to do something with these releases. They can't just sit on them for another year or two because they also still need to produce more things so they can make more money from those down the line too. So like at some point we hit pause this year, but we kind of have to move forward in the safest way possible. And the safest way is not having people go to theaters. That's why I can't understand Christopher Nolan's whining so much. I love his movies. I love his artistic sensibilities and what he goes for with genre movies, but the guy pushed so hard for Tenet to be only in theaters. Like he really, it seems like he strong armed Warner Brothers into making sure that that was a thing that was still released even during a pandemic. Who knows? Like who knows the people who actually went there and if they got sick and if that movie is like indirectly responsible for people getting COVID. And yeah, we're waiting till December to get it now, and I feel like nobody really cares. Like, yeah, I still want to see it, but the cultural conversation of it is gone because of the way they released this thing, and it was just so fractured. I can't stand his whining anymore. That's me.
Yeah, the health obviously
Yeah.
the health concerns are much more paramount over, just the entertainment and cultural
My
value of these
film.
films. I know, and it's ironic that the failure of the film probably helped spark some of these decisions
Yes.
to put next
Mhm.
year's films on HBO. And I think even though it is in the weeds of it, HBO we should discuss HBO Max as a rollout. Was pretty botched. I mean, there's
Oh
still
man.
confusion in the marketplace because of existing contracts with the difference between HBO, which had 30 million subscribers, and HBO Max, which has now only reached about 8 million subscribers, a tenth of what Disney was able to do. And even though it's not for lack of content, they have Looney
Mhm.
Tunes, they have Sesame Street, they have all this stuff they have licensed and original stuff. It's just it's a distant third to the Netflix and the
Yeah.
Disney, and they're all playing catch up right
They couldn't
now.
even get the name right on launch. So I mean, like
They're
the
Well,
name
so
was
there's
confusing.
talk of them that may be changing that. Like
mm,
there are rumors of them maybe pivoting and getting abandoning that HBO
it
name.
should just be HBO. Like let me just say like I've sat through several big streaming services launches, over the past couple of years. Disney Plus felt so controlled and like perfect. Like it's Disney. They know how to do this thing. They know how to handle their brands and their franchises. They were able to like give us early access to it. We were able to test it and see some content. I saw The Mandalorian at the Dolby Theater, the like tiny little Dolby screening room in New York. they had a plan for this. HBO, I spent months just saying, "Hey guys, what's up? Can I see any of these things? Can I look at your app? Is anything going on?" Nobody had a clue, and it wasn't until like the last week before the launch before they were able to like give us clear details, what the pricing was, and certain things like that. So they just seemed very confused. And the fact that this is the same company that produced HBO Now and HBO Go
Oh my God.
and all these
On the back end
things.
of the MLB app. Like there was huge
Yeah.
stories 5 years ago when we were first getting these killer apps on phones and tablets, and they were at the forefront of streaming because they had
Mhm.
the technical know-how. But yeah, bad direct, it's really unfortunate. And as much as we want these to be creatively driven decisions, they're economically driven decisions.
Mhm.
And
And
they're for stocks. It's like not even like
yeah.
reasonable, logical decisions. They're all for shareholder value.
Mhm.
It's disappointing because there's some really good kind of hidden content on HBO Max.
It's
Like
so
their
good. Yeah.
animated lineup is like basically bar none. Like I was watching Infinity Train the other day. What an exceptional little indie series that is just kind of hidden away on this. So it's not just the movies, not just the back catalog of series. There's good independent content that they produce there beyond
Classic film
just the
content.
yeah, beyond just like the HBO shows that we kind of know and love. So
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
what's most disappointing is that it's an opportunity wasted.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I to kind of put a cap on it, I think one of the fundamental differences when you think of Netflix, Disney, and HBO, Disney is they're as an IP factory, they are ingrained as the essential like
Right.
service, right? If you have
Right.
kids, like people have that, they quickly jumped up because they're so pervasive in pop culture with their parks, with their
Mhm.
characters. It was very easy for them to convince people that to just make it part of their billing cycle. With HBO, it's always been the premium model. It's always been the nice to have, the prestige subscription service, and which speaks a
Mhm.
lot for quality. But to launch that after Game of Thrones off the air when they've lost the cultural
Yeah.
conversation, the moment, that seems to be one of the reasons that they're
Mhm.
kind of
With
struggling
with, like,
still.
with Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu around, it's like, what is so prestige about HBO? Like, that argument doesn't quite fit, and, one thing I'll notice too is, like, Disney for years has kind of, like, worked on a level of exclusivity, right? Their Blu-rays have always been very expensive. They would lock them up in the Disney vault, and you couldn't buy them for years, and when they re-release Aladdin for the 10th time, that's your chance to spend $40 on a new Blu-ray. That the fact that all this stuff is just openly available now, I think is a big part of it too. Because as a parent, it used to be so hard to buy a lot of Disney stuff and keep the discs from getting dirty and everything. Now it's just like a little service. You hit a button and you watch some movies. It's perfect for
I
kids.
I just finished I'm on my third MCU rewatch, The
Mhm.
Pandemic, which is it's nuts, but it's
I
like
got more
comfort
movies for
food.
you, Kishore. Like I have
I
so many
watch
more
other
things to recommend
movies.
to you.
I watch other movies, but there is something about
Yeah,
just being in the middle of this period, which has been so hard that a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit of comfort food that like superhero movies
sure,
offer
sure.
has been nourishing in the way that like I watch, Wonderful Life, at
Sure,
Christmas
sure,
time.
sure.
I consider Thor Ragnarok my It's a Wonderful Life during the pandemic. So,
That's a good way. For me, it's Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I think
oh,
is one of the greatest movies ever
great.
made, like bar none. This is just my personal thing. Like once we got through Infinity War and Endgame, I was like, I don't want to see another Marvel movie for a while. Like give me a break. Let me take a reset on these characters so I miss them a little because it just felt like we were so oversaturated with them as a culture. But hey, there's more coming. I like their plans for TV. If we ever see that, that's another thing. They have the Marvel plans into TV, into Disney Plus. They're so good at this. Disney is so evil as a corporation, but so good at managing these properties and making you want them. I don't know why HBO can't take a few lessons from that.
But we might have to take a break so I can fight
Yeah.
Devendra after saying he needs to take a break from
I need a
Let's
animation.
take
break.
So,
let's
Listen.
let's take it off the podcast. Hey, anticipation for the MCU is the perfect segue to move into our next segment. So let me play the stinger. TV aside, WandaVision's coming out. They're producing everything from Ms. Marvel to Moon Knight to She-Hulk. But MCU films, the anchors of that universe. It's been over a year and a half since we've had. I think the last one was Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yes.
And Spider-Man being one of the prestige characters, we've also gone full cycle over the Sony drama of who's going to make Spider-Man films. We know there's going to be at least one more MCU Spider-Man film, and it looks to be a doozy. We don't have a name for it yet, but we have so much ancillary information, casting primarily. So it was announced officially that I think Benedict Cumberbatch, Doctor Strange, is going to be in the movie. Of course, they're both New York superheroes, and Doctor Strange has his film, The Multiverse of Madness, that Sam Raimi's directing, which is going to come off the tails of WandaVision.
Yeah, interesting. Sam Raimi's involved now,
Yeah,
given a lot of this other Spider-Man
I
news.
know.
Yeah.
So the big we thought they hit full fan service with kind of the rumors that the previous Spider-Man that Sony has full rights to, Tobey Maguire, Amazing
Andrew
Spider-Man,
Garfield.
Andrew Garfield,
Andrew
thank
Garfield,
you,
yep.
will both make some type of cameo appearance in the next Spider-Man film, which off of the success of Into the Spider-Verse makes a lot of sense, and that would be something to get me in a theater
Sure.
seat. Absolutely.
They also announced Jamie Foxx. I don't know if they announced it, but Jamie Foxx coming back as Electro. We were all like, wait, did he die?
He died, and he was
What
in the
happened?
other reboot.
What does
Andrew
this mean?
Garfield.
Do
Yeah.
you think they're going to do an Endgame and we're going to go back in? It's not just going to be a different universe, but back in a different time in that universe too?
That seems like way too much work. Like, I don't think they're going to put that amount of effort. But having like Tobey Maguire just walk on to the camera, like walk on Andrew Garfield, and everybody like Tobey Maguire is much older now. He's not going to be doing any web slinging. But I think just having them appear is kind of a cool comic booky thing. Yeah.
I mean, who knows where that version of Spider-Man ended
Yeah,
up? You had
true.
you had the older Spider-Man in the Spider-Verse, and Tobey Maguire could totally take that role, and be tongue in cheek about it, a little Deadpool-like, a little fourth wall winking, nodding at the audience. The news that came out this week, they're fast and furious. You had Alfred Molina also rumored to come back as Doc Ock.
From the best superhero movie of all time. Let me just put this.
Spider-Man 2 is great.
Gauntlet is thrown. So you have this maybe Sinister Six-like assembly of the villains, from Electro to Doc Ock to you have the villains that survived from the previous Spider-Man's.
Let me just say though, where is Paul Giamatti's Rhino? Like, that movie was not good. But Paul Giamatti was really giving it his all in that bad Spider-Man sequel. He was having so much fun with it.
He had the robot suit.
He was so good.
I mean, he was in the big movie poster, so he just appeared at the end. It's a sideways reunion potentially if you have both Paul Giamatti and Sandman in the film as well. But
have we heard if Willem Dafoe is coming too?
I think they got to put a stop somewhere, right? But
yeah. Well, the other news that I'm personally more excited by, maybe most excited by, is the rumor that they might actually be converging with the Netflix Marvel TV series, with the rumor that Charlie Cox, fan favorite Daredevil, may also make an appearance in the Spider-Man film.
Sure,
Marvel
I'm down
TV,
with that.
I'm solely down. Maybe I don't even need him as Daredevil. Maybe just as a lawyer, right? Matt Murdock. I think he was one of the best things.
All of this is just going to be cameo, as long as they just keep it narrowly focused. Like, hey, look at that guy in the background, or hey, like that little like touch. As long as they don't try to do too much with it.
It kind of sounds like that's what's happening though. Like, I do feel like this is the thing. Marvel was so spoiled with Infinity War and Endgame, where they were able to like bring in and have these like have all these people in one movie. Like, they're trying to one up themselves in a way, or at least I do wonder if I forget his name, but the director of the current Spider-Man movies, like maybe he was inspired to kind of do something more. What we're seeing is the reshaping of the future of the MCU, and I don't want to get too nerdy here, but hey, I want the X-Men to be a part of this eventually. Like, let's open this up in a way, because I just saw New Mutants and made me very sad about the legacy of that franchise.
Woo!
Yeah,
that was the worst watch of the pandemic for me. I think that's going to make like my top 5. What did I just do?
Yeah.
X-Men, Fantastic Four. These are the kind of things that, if you want to go back to the future of the MCU landscape, I'm sure Kevin Feige has to contend with the kind of deals they're making with the actors. When a big A-list actor signs on to do a film, to be Mr. Fantastic, to be Sue Storm, to be the new Wolverine, right? What does that deal look like if we're talking about a streaming first MCU world versus a theatrical first MCU world.
I think the legacy of the MCU so far has been a bit of restraint. They took their story arc and spread it over 8 years. Can they keep showing that restraint here? Because I actually think it'll be terrible if they put too much of this stuff forward now.
Yeah.
Like they have a roadmap for like 20, 30 years of great films. Keep it that same pace. Like why mess with the formula to get Wolverine and Reed Richards on the screen together? Like it's just like build the actual narrative case for it. And like what they did so well is they took characters that people didn't have really strong feelings to when you really look back at it. Iron Man, Thor, like I mean, I know they're
Yeah.
famous characters, but like
I didn't
no
care
one's
about
like
them until the MCU.
no one,
Yeah.
no one cared about them at this level. Do that again with Shang-Chi, like with Miss
The
Marvel,
Eternals,
all this like do it again. Run the same script. And I'm saying that just from a business standpoint. I want to see them take risks,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I mean, I don't want to see them try to push too many chips to the center of the table, because that's where you go full Justice League on something. And I
For
think
sure.
everyone
For
knows
sure.
what I mean by when I say that.
The Zack Snyder cut no longer the big anchor for HBO Max next year.
Hey, they put in $70 million for
Oh my
that stupid
gosh.
thing.
For
Yeah.
reshoots and color grading and licensing Leonard Cohen.
And also a square aspect ratio that's going to look awesome on your HD TV. I hate so much about that thing. Bring me on whenever that comes out, and we'll talk about that.
All right, let's move on to a kind of a new recurring segment, because we want to talk about Mando, and so we actually had a fan create a new musical segment for us. Let's move and listen. I've not listened to this yet, but let's hear Mando talk. All right, Mando talk.
Mando talk. Mando talk.
I don't know if that uses sampling from the soundtrack. If we can actually
Yeah.
play that.
That
might-
was great. Outside the DMCA that's coming, I think that was great.
I'm a fan. We'll try to use it again next week. So, chapter 14, is it episode 6? Just aired. Spoilers going forward for the next 5 minutes or so. You guys both saw it. This was highly anticipated. The return of a big Star Wars character. I mean, if you haven't watched yet, I'm sorry. It had Boba Fett in it. What did you guys think of Boba Fett's portrayal? In The Mandalorian?
I disagree that he's a big Star Wars character.
He's a
but
fan
yeah.
favorite. He's
He's a
sold a
fan
lot of
favorite
merchandise.
because we had
Defender,
3 movies. Yeah,
There are no small Star Wars characters.
it's
Only-
true. It's true. Well,
Only
also,
salacious crumbs out there. That's it.
I get what happened. Like, I was not around for the original trilogy era. Like, I was born in 1984, so it all, like, some of this came after me or before me, but the fans had nothing. They had nothing for so long. So you latch on to like every little bit, every little character that you can build a mythos around. I think that's what happened to Boba Fett. And then we saw more of his history in the prequels that I don't think we really needed. But hey, that came full circle, right? Because that same actor is now Boba Fett in Mando.
He's kind of like the Snake Eyes of
Sure.
of Star Wars, right? Like the whole story of the Snake Eyes G.I. Joe character was they just found like another toy and repainted him black to make it cheap, right? To manufacture, but it was so cool. The kids loved it. Same with Boba Fett, with the promise of the rocket launcher that never delivered. And it was just a cool looking toy that the kids loved collecting. And the mystique around Boba Fett, I think, was the selling point. The fact that we
Yes,
did
yes.
not know that there was lore and that the few lines gave you a lot to imagine. Now, taking that out of your head and putting it on screen, the reaction that I saw is that it's very positive. Like people love
Sure.
how badass he was, his fighting style. I think we're all in the same camp that maybe not strictly necessary. But
It's
if they're
pure
gonna do
fan
it-
service. Yeah.
yes, right. But that's kind of what a lot of the show is.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys are being really gentle. I hated this episode. I think this might have
Oh.
been
hate
my-
is a strong word. But
Well, yeah, that's too strong because it's still like better than a lot of Star Wars content that I think we've
Mhm.
gotten. But this is one of my least like episodes of the entire series. And I think it's partially because of how much I enjoyed last week's episode.
Mhm.
I thought that Jedi episode from
Yeah.
the way they paid off old characters like Ahsoka Tano, to the mood, to the way it was shot, to the way
We finally
it
got some
advanced the story.
lightsabers. Like,
Yeah.
it was great.
It
Yeah.
was also like very Western in
Mhm.
its ethos, and which, you know, obviously matches the storytelling they're going for. This
Mhm.
episode didn't make sense. Like the Mando himself wasn't really acting like himself. He was like getting knocked
Fumbling
around a bunch. He
about.
was
Yeah.
fumbling around. And like this whole like payoff for Boba Fett, what we got was like kind of a fat older Boba Fett that like beat up
Hey
a bunch of
now, let's not
stormtroopers.
body shame Boba Fett. But
Yeah.
I think I
I'm
get what
gonna
you're
body
saying.
shame Boba Fett, like
Yeah.
in the sense that the armor didn't fit him. Like,
Hey, we
like
all get old. We all get he's an old clone, right? Is he a clone? He's
He
a
is a clone.
Yeah.
He
He's a
was
clone.
a pure
Yeah.
clone, not
I-
modified. The Django got one clone to raise as his
Yes.
son. I think
my point is that the armor didn't fit well, and what we got to see him do
Sure.
was beat up on stormtroopers, which is like the biggest cliche in Star Wars is to see people beat up on stormtroopers.
I will say, like, here's the thing about this show. It is not always very like it's not well written most of the time. I think this show is written like a video game. And we all accept it, right? It's like it's a fetch quest. He's upgrading his
quest.
armor. Every episode is a fetch quest, every episode is a new adventure. And I think at some point in season 1, I made peace with what this show is, because as much as I love Jon Favreau, like I care more about his world building and his visual sensibility and the mood of the show and the style of the show and the look of it. That's what I really love. You know, the fact that he created a whole new type of way to shoot digital scenery. You know, like he created these LED. I don't know if you guys have talked about
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
but
the volume,
LED
yeah, we have.
screens and everything.
Absolutely,
The
yeah.
volume is amazing, and what they make the show look like, it looks like I'm watching a big budget sci-fi movie, you know, when I'm just watching another TV show, even though it probably costs a lot. But
This was not the
Here-
volume,
here-
though. This
Yeah.
was outside of LA, Vasquez Rock
Yes.
style, Star Trek, bright daylight. It looked like
it looked like Star Trek.
Yeah.
And by the way, this episode was directed by Robert Rodriguez too.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is part of it. I'm a fan of his work. I think the actual action in this episode looks really cool. Like you get 2 full minutes of Boba Fett just like tearing up dudes, doing the final like rockets to destroy the other ships. Like that's pure fan service, but done in a fun way. So yeah, it's not the best episode, but I do think the execution was really good, especially compared to some of the season 1 eps.
That's fair. I just think they
Mhm.
didn't do anything with the Fennec character, like Ming-Na Wen,
Sure,
who's
sure.
incredible
back, yeah.
actress. Like never leveraged her to do anything with her talents.
Mhm.
And then like when you look at like the Dark Troopers or whatever they're called, like
Robo
we had this whole like
Right.
build up to them, and all they did was like fly down, fly up, and I was like, come on.
That's true. Very true. I wanted to see them more engaged in the action. Maybe that's building up.
Yeah.
But going back to even how Boba Fett popped into the episode, right? They had so much mystery at the stinger at the last shot of the episode, the
Mhm.
first episode of the season, just showing his reveal. And again, the mystique of like, ooh, Boba Fett 1 is alive and 2 has sand people weapons. And is he gonna be stalking? Is he gonna is he gonna really be hunting like a bounty hunter,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
But no, he just kind of shows up in Slave 1. Like, where does Slave 1 kind of out of? Shows up and then just like walks up to Mando and says, "Give me my armor." Right? There's no presence of like there's no build up to that encounter. It was just they
And
just
that
got it
is
out
the
of way.
writing. That is the writing. Like this is just not a well written episode of the show. But I do think the stuff that happens to Baby Yoda / Grogu, I'm still not used to saying Grogu, but that's pretty. There's a lot of plot stuff like, oh, we can't touch the Baby Yoda now. Plot energy, blue waves, and then he gets kidnapped. But I think the stuff around him, the fact that this show built up this little puppet so much that we care what happens if he gets kidnapped, and then he's getting, you know, tortured by the villains. Like I felt something there. So I feel like they're just cashing in both fandom in a way, but also what they've built up with actual good episodes of the show too.
Did
Yeah,
you?
Mhm.
I think we're gonna get in the cliffhanger where we'll probably get the reveal of what Jedi heard Grogu is called.
Yes.
And I got physically mad when they
Yeah.
stunned Grogu in the
Mm.
cell. I got
Mhm.
physically mad. So they are doing something right there. But I didn't enjoy like him force pummeling those stormtroopers again.
I was more empathetic with the stormtroopers.
Yeah.
That was more like being a parent and having a toddler throwing you around and then getting tired and taking a nap. That's
Yeah.
what that's what I took out of that. That was sleepy time because he finally
Yeah.
wore himself out. All right, done with the Amanda talk. Last two bits of pop culture. We have some casting news. It looks like Oscar Isaac is fan favorite casting for Solid Snake for the Metal Gear Solid movie, directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts. That's the movie he's wanted to make forever. He's a massive fan, massive Kojima fan. I thought he did a great job with the Kong movie. That was
Kong Skull
visually,
Island is a much better movie than I think most people expected. That is a ton of fun as an action
yeah,
movie. It looks so good too. There are some shots, especially like the early sequences of that movie where like the two pilots kind of crash and confront each other on the beach. It's a good looking action movie in many
totally. And
ways.
that's
Yeah.
Larry Fong,
Yeah.
DP did that. He was a Zack
Mhm.
Snyder's DP for Watchmen and 300. And he knew, I mean, I think the sensibilities that Jordan Roberts has in creating a period piece, the colors,
Mhm.
it was just a vivid film. And if he can kind of adapt those, being a big fan of the game series to make it visually distinct, I think it's going to be really fun.
We're
So
still
looking forward to
waiting
that.
for the good video game movie, I guess. Like the last one was it Assassin's Creed where we were like, "Oh, Fassbender. How can you?" Well, the lead up to it was
Right.
Michael Fassbender and this director who's directed he did the Macbeth remake like recently. It's really interesting visual stylist, but that movie is a goddamn mess. It
What about
is
Tomb Raider?
practically unwatchable. Yeah.
And then Tomb Raider,
Yeah.
kind of just by the
That was fun.
numbers.
That wasn't bad. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, One thing that we wanted to talk about was now that we're in December and we are
Mhm.
back in lockdown, at least in the Bay Area, is what your holiday go-to films are. So, Kishore, you wanted to kick this off. What were your films?
Well, so like the traditional films that I would watch every year are Gremlins. We'd watch, like Charlie Brown Christmas. I mean,
Mhm.
like, I don't think you can call that a film, but like, and we'd watch Grinch and Rudolph and those. And then Nightmare Before Christmas was the other big kind of holiday movie. And like now that I like literally have nowhere to go, um, I'm seeing it like to Devendra's earlier point. I should expand my repertoire
Sure.
and see what others do for their holiday watching, or maybe some just wholly new ideas. Like Scott Pilgrim actually sounds like a really good idea. I love that film. And there was some behind the scenes footage that got released this week that I'd never seen before, of
Ooh,
like
I have not
test
seen that
The
shots
either.
of
anniversary,
Edgar
yeah.
Wright. But anyways,
Mhm.
I'm looking for suggestions for some new holiday tradition movies.
Devendra,
Hmm.
what are your go-tos?
Let's think. I don't have anything super new, but I will say the things I go to aren't just like Die Hard. I think Scrooged is a genuinely good holiday comedy, a little adult, a little like grown up, but I love that movie. Trying to think back here. Hey, Batman Returns
Oh
is a
yes,
Christmas movie,
that's
and it is
100%.
one of my favorite movies. And I think like I revisit that just because that movie kind of shaped me as a child. I just loved it so much. Uh, and that so much about that movie, the setting and the mood and how like it's a tragedy too when it comes to the Penguin and Catwoman. I love that movie so much. It's a little early, but Groundhog Day is also one of my favorite
Yeah.
films, and I think that's something I always watch around this period as well. I don't, I don't have
Groundhog
much of
Day
a.
has
Mhm.
one of the weirdest drink orders in film history that you'll ever see. Andy McDowell orders a vermouth with a twist of lime, and that's all that's in the
Oh,
drink. And you're like,
oh
what was that? It's also one
no.
of the most scientifically accurate films
Mhm.
ever, like in terms of the content within it. But,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
for
yeah.
another
It's
time.
it is early for Groundhog Day, but I think that first of all, any time is a good time for that movie. But I think we did a commentary for Groundhog Day on the Slash Filmcast with Stephen Tobolowsky several years ago, so you can dig that up and check that out. I love that movie just so much. I'm trying to think of what else. There's so many good like New York based ones too. I feel like
Don't you say Love
some
Actually. Don't you say it.
not gonna say Love Actually.
Yes.
But one of the is it the Eddie Murphy movie, the Eddie Murphy Dan Aykroyd movie
Oh, Trading
is
Places.
Trading Places, bit of a holiday movie as well. Coming to America, which also takes place over the holidays. I love Coming to America, one of my favorite movies of all time. So I go back to these movies which reflect kind of the holiday mood. They don't necessarily have to be Christmas movies, you know?
Mhm. How about
Yeah, I
you,
mean,
Norm?
Elf, obviously a modern classic,
So good.
also a New York movie. I want to give a recommendation. Netflix had a series called The Movies That Made Us, kind of spin off of The Toys That Made Us, kind of behind the scenes of how these films were
Hmm.
made. And they just released two mini docs for Christmas movies, the Christmas movies that made us. One for Nightmare Before Christmas and one for Elf. And both of those are really worth watching. Great interviews with the cast and with the production team and the writers, especially. And so recommend those. Yeah, it's Gremlins, Elf, and honestly, Lord of the Rings. Just because, like,
Yeah,
it's something they put in
come
the
on.
That's
background.
right.
Extended edition, and those just got bumped up to 4K HDR on all streaming services, and so it's this
Yeah.
year especially a time to put those on.
Can I ask you guys a question? How are you guys enjoying movies at home? Because right now, my mission is to eventually turn my basement into a bit of a home theater. So I am looking more deeply at projectors. I had a projector at my old apartment, but now I can have like an actual setup and a bigger screen and everything. Are you guys just TVing it up, or do you have projectors or anything at this point?
I'm just TVing it, and I got caught
Mhm.
in a weird cycle for this. So I actually have like we have two main TVs, and the one in my bedroom is actually from 2008. It's
Oh wow!
a but it
If it
won't die.
lives, man, if it
It
lives,
won't
keep going with
die.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so it's only like 720p, but I feel
yeah.
guilty about replacing it. I don't
I
know if
had one.
anyone
I
else
had.
feels that.
Let me tell you, I had one of those, and my wife, we were installing something in our bedroom, and she like dropped a pole in the middle of the screen, and I was like, "Oh no, you killed it! Guess we have to get a new TV for the bedroom."
Yeah, so I've been shopping around for like like a TCL Series 6
Yeah,
to
yeah.
replace
Get a
it.
Roku or something at that point. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
and but
Mhm.
then my front TV is, only about 5 years old, so I don't feel like,
Yeah.
that's reached its end of life cycle to replace it either.
Hmm.
So I've been like a little subpar because I don't have a 4K TV in the house.
Ah. Okay.
uh,
Okay.
I'm completely gone full circle on this because I upgraded this year. I have Atmos, I have a massive 4K OLED, wall
Hmm.
mounted. And when there were the big Mulan, right? We tried to watch Mulan as and put ourselves in the theatrical
Hmm.
mindset.
Hmm.
Like no matter what, and maybe projector is a different story, but no matter how much money you can put into a home theater system, it's less, I think, about the technology and than it is about the mindset. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and really put your phones away, turn off the lights, make some popcorn, and not watch it like TV, but watch it like
Hmm.
you're in a theater. And I know it's really tough to do without the crowd there,
And also
but
with a
that's
kid, it's
yeah,
so hard. Yeah.
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 Every Saturday night, a group of my friends, like we have just a local Discord, we'll watch a movie together, and we'll hop
That's
into
nice.
Discord
Yeah.
chat before and like swap stories about it, and then talk about it afterwards. And we watched Clue the other night, and we're actually going to do over Zoom a staged reading, like a script reading of Clue,
That's
um,
fun.
this Saturday. So we're trying to like turn those just watch a movie into like a little bit more of a social experience.
Hmm.
It like
Hmm.
none of those watch party integrations has really worked well for me.
Yeah.
But I'm
Hmm.
trying to do that where I'm actually trying to be social when I watch movies,
Hmm.
with friends beyond my household, because then it actually feels like you're going to the movie.
You know what you
Gotcha.
should
Gotcha.
do? We're gonna do this Wonder Woman is we're gonna watch it solitary just in our house after the baby goes to sleep and have that mindset, but then get on the Zoom chat afterward to create the lobby and like going into the bar afterward experience to talk about the movie because that's
Gotcha.
something I absolutely miss from
Are
going
you
to a
watching
theater.
it together? Like, are your friends also watching it at the same time, and then you'll
At the
go into the
same
lobby
time,
after?
but
Okay.
not with like the Zoom active.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I don't
Yeah.
want to do. I don't want to have like another screen to hear their
Yes.
gasps. Like that doesn't do
Oh
anything for
man,
me.
it's not great.
Yeah.
I will say this: I don't know if you guys have ever had the pleasure of setting up a projector in your space, but I did. I made it happen when I was in Brooklyn. I'm like in an apartment. Like you can it wasn't even a short throw. Like I just had just enough wall space, like 10 feet between the wall and where the projector was to kind of make it happen. And it was great. Like the size, I feel like the size of it is one thing that makes you less inclined to pick up your phone. When you're consumed by an image, when it looks like you're at a theater, you're just like really into it. So I'd recommend that. I'm doing a bit more exploration of ultra short throws now. So like those boxes that you push right up
Hmm.
to the wall, to the screen. I feel like for a lot of people that could be, a big thing. But yeah, I miss watching movies on a big screen, and it's been nearly a year since I've been to a theater, and I really want to get my projector back on.
It
Yeah.
And are you getting a physical screen for it, or are you just using a wall and some of that reflective paint kind of?
If you search on Engadget, I put up an article, I think in like 2016, about how I fit a projector into my New York apartment, and I had a tripod screen from that. I still have it. It's okay, but my plan now is that, hey, I have space. I have a basement, and I'm definitely going to install like a retracting screen on the ceiling. So that is my next step of just figuring out how to fit this all in and how to get the equipment set up. But that's my dream. Hopefully we can make it happen because yeah, I still have my whole home theater system down here too.
Awesome. One
Mhm.
last recommendation for me. Watch a documentary on Amazon. Amazon Prime has a licensing deal with this documentary films company that does all these films that you wouldn't otherwise see unless you're going to like a film festival. And one's called Game Master. It's
Mm.
about tabletop game designers, and it follows the paths of four independent tabletop game designers making board games and trying to go to conventions and sell them and get them published or do self-publishing from Kickstarter. And they as well interview the designers of some of the best, most well-known tabletop games. So if you're a fan of, Catan to Seven Wonders, Ticket to Ride, you should check that out on Amazon Prime. All right, let's move over to technology news. Just one big piece of news I want to talk about this week. That is Apple's surprise announcement of their new headphones, the AirPod Max. $550 came out of nowhere and
Mm.
yet already pre-sold out through March. I mean, is this
I don't know
surprising?
what to do with you people. I don't know what to do.
No,
Come on.
I think they just had PS5 level stock, and that's how they sold out so quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
Or they counted on people not being able to buy PS5s, having
Mhm.
their money in their PayPal accounts or credit card accounts, and then now buying something else extravagant, hugely extravagant for the holidays. I'm not going to knock them because, like, we haven't used them yet, and presumably Apple has very high standards with their drivers. It sounds like they use the same technologies as the AirPod Pros in terms of noise cancellation, as well as having independent Bluetooth receivers on left and right channels for syncing. So it's going to be highly integrated, of course, with your Apple devices, iOS. It does work as Bluetooth headphones. There is a 3.5 millimeter adapter, but it does
You have to
require
buy it separately.
power.
Yeah.
You have to buy it
Yeah.
separately, absolutely, and it does no passive audio pass through without actually being charged. So
What?
over time, with power, the battery, integrated battery dying eventually, you have to pay $70 to have that replaced. But it's a $550 more expensive than Beats Bluetooth noise canceling headphones.
Yeah.
Like, we're at the price point now where we're talking about planar magnetic headphones, right? Like, I get like those aren't wireless and whatnot, but if you're talking about having the best sound experience possible, well, now you're like actually at the price point of the other thing that's actually the best sound
Yeah.
experience possible.
But
So
it
I
doesn't
just don't
matter if
get it.
it's actually the best, right? Like it's weird. I think what annoys me about these things, and I haven't tried them yet. I'm gonna try to keep an open mind to actually test them out. But I have a hard time believing they're actually worth $550. Like, here's the thing: I've been
What is
such a
worth?
big
What
fan.
is worth to you?
What is worth? It's true. It's true. But when like the best noise canceling cans on the market right now cost between 300 and $400, right? I'm talking the Sony 1000 XM3s or 4s or the latest Bose. Like either of those, you'll have a really good pair of headphones. The Apple Premium here is what the materials, the fact that they have
It's
H1 chips, it's easy synchronization. I don't quite get it, and the fact that it's so much harder to actually use it plugged in if you need to. It just costs so much. I feel like the cost reminds me of like the $1,000 monitor stand that they announced last year, which is sort of like Apple thing of like why who needs this? Why are
the
you
big test
doing
of
this?
this is that
Yeah.
in the lockdown, in the pandemic world, where people can't flaunt the fact that they have these on the subway or on
Yeah.
the playground, like the AirPods were so successful because they became a prestige item for all ages, right? For $150, $200,
What's
kids
it
wanted them.
more affordable, right? It's not $550. Yeah.
Also, the
Like,
one ear thing was like a big kind of shift in user behavior.
Yes.
Uh, and
Yes.
that's not here. Also, no one is commuting anymore and flying on planes, which is the biggest use case for noise canceling. So I don't get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yep.
Still sold out till March. Comes in a bunch of colors. And good for Apple. They still own Beats, so it's them moving into
Yeah,
that
the
market.
Beats
There's money
engineers
to
are
be
looking
made.
at this like, hey guys, come on.
And upselling was our thing, right? Overpriced headphones is our thing. Stop moving in our space. I also wanted to use this segment as a time to pick your brain, Venture, about the tech you've been reviewing, because you have access to a lot of cool gear. It sounds
Sure.
like you guys just over Engadget reviewed the new Apple M1 powered laptops. Can you tell us about your experience with those as well as the new game consoles?
Sure. Yeah. I just I went on break for the past 2 weeks, and right before that, I put up my review of the M1 MacBook Air, which is fantastic, phenomenal. Like this is the other side of Apple, the side of Apple that is truly like transformative and is pushing the industry forward because the M1 chip is incredibly fast. It is the fastest laptop chip I've ever seen. The MacBook Air is fantastically fast. It's so zippy. It's so responsive. It plays games well. Has incredible battery life, and it doesn't have a fan. It's like a miracle, laptop. And the fact that it's still the same price as the last MacBook Air, this is everything I want. It's the premium Apple style, Apple innovation, but still delivering actual user value, which I'm not seeing with these headphones. I just started playing around with the MacBook Pro because I got that a little late. It seems fine. I feel like I'm still formulating my theories around this because benchmark wise, it's actually the same. It is the same as the MacBook Air. So that is kind of fascinating that there aren't like many other levels of this chip. The base MacBook Air chip has 7 GPU cores, and that's like the big difference. And the MacBook Pros and the higher end MacBook Air ones have 8 GPU cores. But beyond that, it's the same processor. The cooling is different. The cooling is active on the MacBook Pro. So you actually have a fan. And I think that's going to make it more useful for like sustained stuff. So the stuff you guys do, video encoding, when you need to really crunch that processor for a while, it'll be better for it. Whereas the MacBook Air, I hear, kind of slows down if you use it for really, really intensive stuff for too long. So that seems like the big thing. I do feel like I'm a little more let down by the MacBook Pro because it still only has two USB-C ports. This is replacing the base level MacBook Pro. So
Yeah.
limited to 16 gigabytes of RAM. I would like more ports. I still would like a card slot on a MacBook Pro, and I really miss that whole thing. They're never going to go back to that,
No,
but
no.
it would be
So
nice.
brave, so brave,
Yeah,
Apple.
so brave.
Well,
It's the same design as before, so nothing too surprising.
I'm surprised you didn't say the webcam. That's the only thing that I feel like is the
The
real
webcam is so
downer.
bad. Yeah. I mean, it's not it is kind of criminal right now. Like the fact that I'm getting like great webcams in like the Surface. I'm thinking the Surface Go 2 that I reviewed last year had a great webcam. It had even the like Intel RealSense stuff, so it could actually log you in with Windows because it had like face tracking and everything, or face sensing. Um, I don't know what Apple's doing there. It's kind of weird, especially in this era. I'm hoping like next year seems like they can actually redesign these machines and the cases and everything around the new M1 chips or the M2 chips or whatever those things are going to be called. So this is what we were kind of waiting for, is like new hardware for them to build a completely different design around, because I do think the MacBook Air should be lighter. It should be lighter. It should be smaller. We're seeing 2.2 pound laptops from Asus. I've reviewed some that are super, super light and tiny. I think it was there are a couple I've reviewed that were like 2.5 pounds and still pretty powerful. And I feel like Apple can achieve that too. They just need to rethink their overall designs.
And product segmentation, something to actually
Yeah.
differentiate the Air and the Pro.
Yep.
On the Pro side, still, even on the 13-inch, you can buy either the M1 powered version or the Intel version, which obviously over the next 2 years will change. The rumor the reporting out of Bloomberg is that they're already planning, what the MacBook Pro and the Mac Pros with the M1 or the follow-ups to the M1s, and whether that would be more cores or there'll be a new kind of iteration on that chip. I think with all the positivity coming out of the reviews from Engadget and all the other
Mhm.
review sites for the M1 powered chips, it seems like the idea of a compromise with ARM based Mac OS computing that's like my brain is still trying to come to
It's
terms with
hard.
that,
It's hard. Like,
right?
yeah,
Like
I'm somebody
you
who
yeah.
I've reviewed these systems for a while. I've been reviewing Intel and AMD systems for a while, and the fact that okay, we knew the A series chips that were pretty powerful, right, on the iPhone, iPad. It was like okay, pretty powerful for like a tablet, right, or for a phone. But no, they prove that these things are genuinely just as fast as what Intel and AMD are cooking up. my real question is, how can they expand? What can they do on the desktop side of things? Who knows? I don't think Apple cares about desktops much anymore, so they could probably take their time a little with that. Yeah.
And graphics too. I mean, that's
Yep.
where we haven't really seen what does that what does it mean when they up the graphics part of the M chips to compete with Nvidia and AMD, and that's disruption that we haven't seen ever in
It
that
is.
in that
It's
business.
pretty wild. Like this thing is pretty. It's almost as fast benchmark wise as like a GTX 1650, from
Oh,
what I've seen in some
yeah.
tests. And like being able to play games like the Pathless or like large 3D games. I was even running Fortnite, even though it was running in emulation. And it was crashing all the time because Apple and Epic are having their fight. Fortnite ran at 60 FPS when I was running it at like 720p, which
And
is
low TDP. That's the thing. Low
yeah,
power, no
low
fans
power.
need to spin up, and that's where again our brains are trying to reconcile high
Mhm.
performance with long battery life and not super hot
Yeah.
processors and computing. It's a
Intel just looks awful after all this too, because they just
yeah,
announced what their 7 nanometer chips are delayed and for
yeah.
2 years. Like they don't really have much to stand on right now except super powerful desktop chips, and even then AMD is like has a lot more cooking right now.
The two things that also kind of pertaining to the future is the AR applications, right?
Hmm.
All this experience, like this, like the Trojan horse here is what does it post, traditional laptop and desktop and tablet computing look like? And this is like Apple back in the iPod Nano days, exercising their manufacturing prowess with NAND, except they're doing with compute. And
Hmm.
if they can get M1 on a roadmap where whenever they're ready to announce their AR headset, to have processing built into the glasses and not need a puck or something and be able to do that all that IO and all that kind of the learnings they have with their LiDAR, like that's something I'm not really prepared for.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the new MacBook Pro is what it means for the 16 inch, right? Something that, the emulation, the Rosetta stuff being so powerful, that's also another big surprise here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
So,
there are compatibility issues too. Like I've seen some people. I only had basically a week with the MacBook Air before I could really like get my review out and everything. But other people who've tested it longer have found like more app compatibility issues and whatnot. Because yeah, you're emulating. It's a complex thing. I think there are going to be a lot of apps that need some time for developers to kind of work through it and work on the M1. But I'm still shocked by how well it works. Like emulated Intel apps at times still work faster than native, Intel PCs I've
on
seen. It's
x86,
wild.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they
it's
had to get that
wild.
right. That they needed
Hmm.
to be seamless because they're not even telegraphing to
Yeah.
consumers the difference between these
Hmm.
models.
But
I
that's
think
impressive because it's
mhm.
almost never been right in any other launch when
Yes,
they've had to do it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And also, hey, I lived through the first Rosetta launch. I was working in IT at the time, and supporting Macs during that shift was not fun. Although the whole like boot camp thing and parallels, it was really fun to like get like a single system setup for people that was both Windows and Mac. You can't really do that now. I think Parallel says they're going to have something working on M1 soon, but we don't quite know. The one other thing I'll point out here, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but I do think Apple just seems like they're on a ball here. I'm really impressed with what they're doing, and oh yeah, the emulation compared to what Microsoft has done. I think
Mhm.
this is what I'm really comparing it to. I'm comparing the M1 chips to like the Surface Pro X or like
ARM
so
on
many of the
Windows, Windows on
Snapdragon. Yeah,
ARM. Yeah.
Windows on ARM is such a disaster, right? There is no x64 emulation. That means like you will just randomly find apps that just do not run on this, $1,000 plus beautiful laptop. And that's just kind of unconscionable. Like those are machines I can't recommend to anybody because they just don't work. Whereas you pick up a MacBook Air and you'll never have to think about the fact that you're using a completely different architecture because everything just kind of runs fine. Yeah.
Uh, we are running short on time, so we won't talk about game consoles this week. But yeah, game consoles still can't buy them anyway.
Yeah.
But let's
I'm
move.
sure you guys are all talked out of those anyway. Like, come on. That's all we've been talking about for
Yeah,
months, right?
I finished the Miles Morales game, and I have to say, like, I was disappointed because it feels like a
Mhm.
DLC. So, like,
Yeah.
as a launch title, I've been a little disappointed, but I've heard good things about Astro Boy. That's the one that I've been wondering about and wondering how, like, some of the
Astrobot.
up
Yeah. Astrobot is very
Astrobot,
good.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. I really love Miles Morales. Like, to be honest, like as somebody who doesn't have as much dedicated gaming time, the ability to like just have this contained narrative, even though it's a little smaller, was nice. Like I can't always devote 50 hours to game. hey, Cyberpunk is launching today, and I'm fully prepared to change my life around for that game a little, but I can't do that for everything, right?
I'll wait till it's patched, till they fix the bugs, till they balance it out. All right, let's move on to the science segment.
Now it's time for a moment of science.
I'm going to keep this relatively short because everyone is getting bombarded with news of the vaccine. And I'm here to tell you that's not good for you because the vaccine rollout is actually going to take a lot of time. It's really a logistical distribution challenge more than it is a scientific one at this point. And that news is going to come at you en masse for months and months and months upon end. And I think the most important thing to do is to be patient, is to meter your intake of the vaccine news, and to have a lot of compassion and empathy for people that have concerns about it. Because all of those things that people might have concerns about are generally legitimate. There's going to be a ton of bad actors out there. So putting them aside, I personally have some questions and concerns about this. Where we are is, if you're listening to this on Thursday, the FDA vaccine approval board is meeting to review the data. This is an independent set of scientists outside the FDA. It's likely they're going to approve this. FDA scientists released data on the Pfizer vaccine, additional data that looks incredible. It's really stuff that I never expected to see in terms of the difference in response between people that got the placebo and people that received the actual dose. There's two bits of news out of that. Is one that we saw a reduction in we saw an antibody response within 2 weeks of the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine, and there was always a concern like, when are you actually going to be protected? Is it after the first dose or the second dose? And you're still going to get the second dose, but the idea here is that there is even going to be some protection here after the first dose, which is incredible news. The other is just seeing the data in full. You can really see the departure in number of cases of COVID in the two groups, and it's so pronounced. There's one graph that is kind of making its way through science communication Twitter that I just never thought I'd see on a vaccine. In our lifetime, we have never seen a vaccine that has been this effective in this small of a population so far. Like we're talking like back through flu, measles. Like, this is an incredible achievement. That being said, here's what I think you can expect over the coming weeks as this vaccine gets rolled out to healthcare workers and then slowly start to get into elderly and essential worker populations. Bob Wachter, who's the chief of medicine at UCSF, posted this, and I think it's important to keep in mind. If we vaccinate, let's say, 10 million people over the next 3 months, we're hoping it'll be more than that, but I think we should meet our expectations on how many people actually get vaccinated. If we do that, this is the normal course of things that will happen among those people. About 4,000 will have a heart attack, 4,000 will have a stroke, 10,000 will come down with a cancer diagnosis, and about 15,000 of them will die. This is just the natural course of things that happen amongst a population of 10 million. Now, if you take that population 10 million and you have a lot more elderly people in that population, those numbers will even go higher. So what we're going to hear in the coming weeks and months is lots of cases of people having quote unquote reactions to the vaccine. And what we need to tease apart is it an actual reaction to the vaccine or something that happened in the normal course of their life? And that's going to be critical for us to digest responsibly, because a lot of media sources will not report it that way. And I bring this up because already today, we've gotten reports of 2 cases of allergic reactions in patients in the UK that got the AstraZeneca vaccine. And in those cases, all that's been reported so far is, when we're recording this, is that those 2 patients had anaphylaxis and they had some version of allergic history in their of severe allergies in their medical history. We don't know more at this point, and all anaphylaxis says is that they had an allergic reaction to this. And so now they're recommending not giving this to people that have severe allergies. And that's being really cautious at the outset of this, because people's perceptions are going to be driven by this initial sort of rollout. But it goes to the larger point: is all of these things will take time for us to learn. And so I am preaching patience here, and like a really sort of an eye toward sort of critically thinking when you see information come up about the adverse events. What's really important in this early case is that the adverse events that do happen get reported up, especially here in the US, through to the CDC, so that they can take like very accurate sort of like case counts and case histories and understand what is actually related to the vaccine and not. Because even though we did, a appropriately large trial, one of the largest trials we've ever done for a vaccine, in case of Pfizer, we're still going to see different things when we roll it out to a larger population. So I know I sound like hesitant and like even cautious. I am really excited about the vaccine development. I just think we need to have a lot of patience about what this rollout is going to look like, and it is not going to be some magical thing that brings this pandemic to an end. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to happen in terms of masking, social distancing, and other behavior. And then behind the scenes, really the challenge for the next administration is going to be about supply chain management, distribution, cold chain storage, getting this out to rural communities, getting this out to people who have never gotten a vaccine before. There's 40% of the US population in terms of adults that have never received a vaccination as an adult. So all of this is like a massive logistical challenge, but I'm still really hopeful about what this means for the pandemic. But I'll leave you with this thought. I saw somebody post this on Twitter, so take it for what that means. Is that they're hopeful that in a few months that our streets will be filled with elderly folks just partying their minds off because they will have all successfully received the vaccine. And they showed an image from a Simpsons episode where it's just all the elderly residents of Springfield who are out dancing the street. So I actually hope that's what the world looks like.
Sure.
And even just culturally, like as a society, if we're able to see our parents and just the our loved ones in our immediate family who we avoided seeing because of this, that I think will lift the mood of the nation.
Yeah, and I said this like almost a month ago now. I think I will see a movie in a theater before the end of the summer.
All
It may
right.
not
I
be
hope
a good
so.
movie, but I'll see a movie.
Yeah. So say we all. Let's all hope that's possible.
Dune,
Yeah.
please let it be
Dune.
Dune. All right, thank you, Kishore, for that update, and we'll do a very quick last segment with VR.
The VR Minute. Virtual reality this week.
Just two things in VR I want to bring up. One, if you haven't had a chance on the Oculus Quest, there's a game or an experience called The Under Presents. It's an immersive theater, kind of appointment-based game where you can. Well, they did this whole game where you can play, and they had live performances of people wearing VR headsets in the game world. This kind of multiplayer social experience, but they also did this. Ticketed experience called The Tempest, which was amazing. It was like virtual theater that you paid and you got to go through a like 30-minute performance and be a part of that performance in headset with a real performer interacting with the attendees. One of the, I think, really groundbreaking things for VR, and definitely relevant during the pandemic as people aren't able to go to real theater. But the developers and the writers actually published the script for that, which I think is a really interesting document. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but it's basically the performer's script and how they think about VR performance and immersive theater performance in VR. So really fascinating. If you had a chance to check that out, The Owner Presents is still available right now on the Oculus Store. The other really big release that we've been waiting for this year is Respawn Entertainment's Medal of Honor for VR, coming out also this week. Unfortunately, poorly timed with the Cyberpunk release. Cyberpunk
Oh,
not
man.
in VR. And we'll have our review out by the time the game comes out. But early previews came out this week, and I'm able to talk about the first two missions. I don't want to give away too much of my thoughts on it, but I do want to set expectations. where you might have read about high system requirements for the game, and yes, they are very high. I was playing it on the GeForce 2070 Super, and the recommended requirements are actually a 2080 with an Intel
Wow.
9000 series. They actually say it's more CPU bound than GPU bound because of the physics, the ragdoll physics of the enemies. But I was having performance problems playing on a Quest 2, so I ended up playing most of the game on the Rift
Oh no.
S because
That's
lower
killing me, by the
refresh
way.
rate.
Like I have an 8700K. I'm like, man, now
Get
it's
an
really
AMD.
feeling that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is, it's primarily a single player game with multiplayer. Multiplayer, very deathmatchy, very kind of run and gun. Uh, Not like a big, battle royale game or like a progression based game, not like Battlefield at all, more like old school Medal of Honor, old school deathmatch. The single player, 6 missions. It's pretty expansive. The first 2 missions I can talk about. What you should set your expectations is that the missions are kind of broken up into these vignettes almost. Each mission has 9 different submissions, and the submissions are basically they're linear, but they kind of phase you out. They're kind of abrupt sometimes in their ending. There are some of them, it pays off toward the end of each mission, but it's not an Half-Life Alex style full linear going through the world from beginning to end experience. It is jumping you, vignetting you out and teleporting you to a different part of the world, different part of the war, with every mission. But that's Medal of Honor, and I will have to I'll have to agree with some of the mixed reactions so far from some of the other press that have written about it. That's it for the podcast this week. Devindra, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and other work that you do online?
Oh, well, happy to be here. Love to come on anytime. I'm on @Devindra on Twitter, and you can find me on the /Filmcast podcast at /film.com. I'm also at Engadget, where I co-host the Engadget podcast too.
Awesome. Kishore, anything to shout out for you?
I want to plug 2 things. I started playing Hades this week, and that is one of the best games I played this year.
So good.
So
Yeah.
much fun. I know I'm late to the party, but I just think that should be up for one of the best games of the year. And second is there's a geomagnetic storm that's going to be visible over much of the northern half of the U.S. So especially if you live in the Midwest, go outside, because when I say geomagnetic storm, I mean the northern lights will be visible over parts of Minnesota, North Dakota, Michigan, even parts of New York. And there's
That's
some maps available for that.
very, very cool. We'll be back next week with another episode. Of course, you can find all our stuff on tested.com and our YouTube channel. Thank you again, Devindra, for joining us. We do have an outro this week. This one's created by Great Job, and it's called Kishore's Bots. And here it goes. I have not listened to this one either.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
Tested.
Twitter hasn't really commented on this, so we don't know if this crackdown is about those inflated numbers, because you can inflate your numbers a million ways. There's whole server farms where you can pay $10 for 1,000 followers or whatever.
That explains your numbers.
Oh,
Whoa.
that's a deep cut.
Tested.
Last I checked, you're winning that Twitter follower battle, Kishore, right? I'm pretty sure. Jeremy will be back. next week,
Everyone
I
is
think.
losing is the answer to that question.
All right, we'll see y'all next week. Bye.